California, a true paradise on the west coast of America, known for its stunning beaches, its majestic mountains, and its enviable climate, transformed into a nightmare scenario on Christmas of 2024. What should have been a time of celebration, of family gatherings around a bountiful table, of children opening presents with eyes sparkling with joy, became a desperate struggle for survival. The waters that fell from the sky during that period were not ordinary rains. They were true celestial waterfalls that transformed the American dream into an aquatic hell of biblical proportions. But what you are about to discover goes far beyond the devastating floods. What appeared to be mere record-breaking flooding, however catastrophic it was, now conceals an underground threat that could completely redefine the future of that state. A threat that is keeping the world's greatest geology experts awake at night. A revelation that is causing panic in the corridors of the most prestigious universities in the world. Prepare yourself, because what I am about to reveal may completely change the way you understand natural disasters and the invisible forces that shape our planet. It all began when not one, not two, but three consecutive atmospheric rivers decided to attack California with a fury never seen in modern history. For those who don't know, an atmospheric river is an extraordinary meteorological phenomenon, a kind of giant corridor of moisture that forms over the oceans and travels through the atmosphere, carrying absurd amounts of water vapor. When a single atmospheric river hits the coast, it's already cause for concern. When three of them align in sequence, the result is a catastrophe of epic proportions. Entire cities were literally swallowed by the furious waters. Streets that were once scenes of peaceful late afternoon strolls transformed into relentless torrents, dragging cars as if they were plastic toys. Homes that housed generations of families were invaded by mud and destruction. The trail left by these storms was one of pure despair and devastation. Entire families were trapped on their rooftops, crying out for help, while helplessly watching their lives being swept away by the current. Children crying in fear, elderly people trembling from cold and desperation, pets lost in the turbulent waters. The vital infrastructure of the state, that same infrastructure that supports one of the largest economies in the world, simply collapsed under the relentless fury of the water. Bridges that had stood for decades were torn from their foundations. Roads that connected communities were split in half. Sewage systems collapsed, mixing contaminated waters with the floods and creating a nightmarish health risk. Emergency services, even with all their preparation and dedication, were completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of the disaster. The chaos that set in was total and absolute. Imagine, if you can, more than 6 inches of rain falling per hour. That equals approximately 15 centimeters of water dumped from the sky in just 60 minutes. Multiply that by hours and hours of continuous precipitation, and you'll begin to have an idea of what Californians faced that fateful Christmas. Historic rivers, those same rivers that local residents had known since childhood, that seemed so peaceful and predictable, overflowed in ways never before recorded. Crucial highways, vital arteries that keep the state's economy running, were simply swallowed by the waters. Interstate 5, one of the most important highways on the entire West Coast, became impassable in several stretches. Drivers were trapped in their vehicles, some for hours, others for entire days, without access to food, water, or bathrooms. Airports that normally receive millions of passengers had to suspend all operations. Flights were canceled en masse, leaving desperate travelers stuck in crowded terminals, frantically trying to find a way to reach their destinations or simply get back home. Millions of people were left without electricity. Imagine that for a moment. Millions of homes plunged into darkness, without heating, without the ability to cook food, without access to crucial information about the development of the crisis. Communications were cut off in several regions, isolating entire communities from the rest of the world. People who were desperately trying to contact family members to find out if they were alive found only the agonizing silence of dead phone lines and collapsed internet networks. The National Guard was mobilized in an unprecedented emergency operation. Helicopters cut through the gray skies trying to identify people trapped in flooded areas. Rescue boats navigated through streets that were once busy avenues, now transformed into apocalyptic Venice canals. The soldiers worked tirelessly, in shifts that extended far beyond what was humanly reasonable, in a desperate race against time to save as many lives as possible. Christmas, that time of peace and joy, had transformed into a true survival nightmare. But while the water slowly began to recede, While families began the arduous process of assessing the damage and trying to rebuild their lives, something far more sinister was happening in the depths of the earth. Something that few noticed initially, but that would soon catch the attention of the world's most renowned scientists. A new horror was emerging from the shadows, and this horror had nothing to do with the water still draining through the devastated streets. Seismic sensors scattered throughout California began to detect anomalous activity. At first, the technicians responsible for monitoring this equipment thought it could be a calibration error, perhaps some interference caused by the extreme weather conditions. But as more and more sensors confirmed the same strange readings, it became clear that something very real was happening. An unsettling tremor, a persistent vibration coming from the depths of the Earth's crust, was being recorded throughout the region affected by the floods. And here is the crucial detail that differentiated this activity from a common earthquake. The seismic signature was completely different from anything the experts had ever seen. It wasn't the characteristic tremors of tectonic plates moving naturally. It was something different, something that suggested an external cause. A trigger that had been activated by forces that normally don't interfere with the geological dynamics of a region. The scientists analyzing this data began exchanging worried glances. Something was very wrong. As the analyses progressed, a terrifying hypothesis began to take shape in the laboratories and research centers. A hypothesis that, if confirmed, would have catastrophic implications for millions of people. The researchers realized they were facing a phenomenon that, although theoretically known, had never been observed on such a dramatic scale in modern history. And the truth that emerged from these investigations is absolutely terrifying. The colossal mass of water deposited by the catastrophic floods, we're talking here about billions upon billions of tons of water accumulated over Californian soil in a matter of days, acted as what scientists are calling an unprecedented hydraulic trigger. Think about that for a moment. Billions of tons. Each liter of water weighs 1 kilogram. Each cubic meter of water weighs 1 ton. Now multiply that by the total area affected by the floods, by the centimeters and centimeters of accumulated water, and you'll have an idea of the absolutely unimaginable pressure that was exerted on California's earth crust. This enormous pressure didn't simply stay on the surface. It penetrated the geological faults that cut through California like invisible scars from past eras. And here's the problem. California is not just any state from a geological point of view. It is situated exactly over one of the most active and dangerous seismic zones on the entire planet. The famous San Andreas Fault, which cuts through the state from north to south for more than 1,200 kilometers, is just the most well-known of a complex network of faults that make the region a true geological time bomb. What scientists discovered is that the pressure exerted by the floodwaters may have altered the delicate balance of tensions that keeps these faults in a state of relative dormancy. It's as if you had a door that is about to open, kept closed only by a very specific pressure. Suddenly, someone places an enormous weight on that door's hinge. What happens? The balance is disturbed, the tension is redistributed, and the door can open violently and unpredictably at any moment. Experts are using the term hydraulic trigger because that's exactly what appears to have happened. The water not only pressed on the soil's surface, but also infiltrated the porous rocks, altering the natural lubrication of the geological faults. Faults that were stable, slowly accumulating energy over decades or centuries, may have had their breaking point dramatically accelerated. In other words, an earthquake that might have naturally taken another 50 or 100 years to happen may now be much closer to manifesting. And we're not talking here about just any earthquake. We're not talking about a tremor that knocks down a few shelves and scares residents for a few seconds. We're talking about the potential awakening of a megaquake, the type of seismic event that occurs only a few times per millennium, but when it happens, completely redefines the geography and history of a region. An event capable of swallowing entire cities, of opening giant fissures in the ground, of triggering devastating tsunamis on the coast, of literally redrawing the map of the most populous state in the United States. The scientists who are monitoring this situation are in a state of controlled panic. On one hand, they know that alarming the population without conclusive data could cause mass hysteria and immeasurable economic damage. On the other hand, they also know that ignoring the signs could result in a humanitarian catastrophe of unimaginable proportions if the earthquake does actually happen without people being prepared. It's an ethical and scientific dilemma that is keeping some of the greatest minds in world geology awake at night. The most frightening thing of all is the absolute uncertainty surrounding the situation. Unlike other natural disasters such as hurricanes or floods, which can be predicted with some advance notice thanks to modern meteorological technologies, earthquakes remain essentially unpredictable. Scientists can identify risk zones, can calculate statistical probabilities, can detect precursor signs in some cases, but they can never say with certainty when or where the next big earthquake will happen. And that's exactly what makes the current situation so agonizing. At this very moment, as you hear these words, seismic sensors scattered throughout California continue to record anomalous activity. Small tremors, imperceptible to most people but extremely significant for those who know how to interpret them, continue to occur in worrying sequences. Each of these microtremors could be a release of tension that postpones the big event, or it could be a sign that the system is approaching its critical breaking point. No one knows for sure. The communities affected by the floods, which are still trying to recover from the water damage, now face a new layer of uncertainty and fear. How can you rebuild your life, invest in expensive repairs, return to work normally, when there is the possibility that everything could be destroyed again? This time, even more devastatingly, the psychological impact of this uncertainty is immense and is generating a silent mental health crisis that few are openly discussing. Government. Authorities are in an extremely difficult position. They need to balance the need to inform the population with the risk of causing unnecessary panic. Evacuation plans are being hastily revised, early warning systems are being tested and updated, emergency supplies are being checked and expanded, but deep down everyone knows that if the megaquake really comes, the scale of destruction will be so great that no contingency plan will be sufficient to prevent a humanitarian tragedy of historic proportions. What makes this situation even more complex is the fact that similar phenomena have already been observed in other parts of the world, although on smaller scales. Scientific studies have documented cases where large amounts of water, whether from floods or from artificial dams, altered the seismic activity of specific regions. The most famous case is probably that of the Zipingpu Dam in China, which some scientists believe contributed to the devastating Sichuan earthquake in 2008, which killed nearly 70,000 people. But what is happening in California is different in several crucial aspects. First, the amount of water involved is absolutely extraordinary, much greater than in any previous case studied. Second, the affected region coincides precisely with some of the most dangerous geological faults on the planet. And third, the population at risk is much larger, with tens of millions of people living in areas that would be directly affected by a megaquake. The coming months will be crucial in determining whether the worst-case scenarios will materialize or whether California's Earth will find a way to release the accumulated tension in a more gradual and less catastrophic manner. Scientists will continue obsessively monitoring every tremor, every variation in seismic data, trying to find patterns that might offer some kind of early warning. But the truth is that with current knowledge, we are essentially in the dark, waiting for the unpredictable. What we can state with certainty is that Christmas of 2024 in California was much more than a series of devastating floods. It was possibly the beginning of a sequence of events that could culminate in one of the greatest natural catastrophes in American history. A time bomb has been armed in the depths of the earth, and no one knows when it will explode. The only thing left for people who live in that region is to prepare as best as possible, stay informed, and hope that nature will be more merciful than the scientific data suggests. The history of humanity is marked by moments when forces much greater than us remind us of our fragility before the power of nature. Christmas of 2024 in California may very well go down in history as one of those defining moments. A moment when the water that fell from the sky not only destroyed houses and roads, but potentially awakened a sleeping giant that could forever change the destiny of millions of people.